So welcome to our event this afternoon, Ask an Attorney, but we've decided to add our lobbyist, Mark Dan, so you can ask legal and policy questions this afternoon. Remember, though, that we do have a lot of attendees this year, and we are limited in time, so we have to vacate the room by 5 p.m. so they can transform the room for dinner. So we only have 45 minutes, so in order to get to as many people as possible, we need you to be succinct in your questions, and we will have to cut you off if your question is really just a comment or a story. So, you should also remember that there are 5 of us here who are lawyers, and if you do drone on, we are not afraid of billing you for your time. So yesterday you met some of our attorneys during our year in review, and today I'm joined with a different group of attorneys, so I'm going to introduce them briefly before we start. So Sam Grover is an associate attorney for FFRF and a member of our litigation team. He was an intern for FFRF when he was a law student at Boston University School of Law. He was one of our very first interns. He joined our staff in 2013. He definitely has been messing with Texas, overseeing 2 of our most recent lawsuits here, including our ongoing lawsuit against Governor Abbott. He's also the dad. This deserves applause too. He's also the dad of 2 young children, Edie and Soren. So you met Ryan Jayne yesterday, but for those of you who weren't here or you missed it, he was also an intern and extern with FFRF when he was at Lewis and Clark School of Law. In 2015, he became the Diane Ewell Legal Fellow and joined as a staff attorney in 2017. He is currently on our strategic response team and helps to track legislation on the state level, drafts public comment and testimony on policy issues at both the federal and state levels. He's going to be an integral part of our forthcoming FFRF Action Fund, and he's also the dad of 2 little girls, Leona and Zelda. Then we are joined by 2 of our rockstar new hires, Sammi Lawrence and Kat Grant. They were both interns in the summer of 2020, so they are our pandemic interns. They were part of the class that was completely remote, but they enjoyed their time so much that they stayed on as interns and externs the next academic year. But when they first started working for us and getting paid by us, that was the first time any of us actually met them in person. So Kat Grant is our very first Equal Justice Works Fellow, sponsored by the Collins Colder Foundation. Equal Justice Works is a prestigious fellowship program that selects fewer than 100 fellows each year. They're working on a specific project here at FFRF focusing on state church issues that specifically impact the LGBTQIA+ community. Kat graduated from the Indiana University Moore School of Law in May and started with FFRF in September. Sammi Lawrence started as the Ann Nicole Gaylor Legal Fellow in June and has already made waves in helping resolve state church complaints, helped figure out the aftermath of the Kennedy and Carson decisions on our intake work, and helped design the Know Your Rights campaign. She graduated from Wisconsin Law School in May and recently got married. And then you met Mark Dan yesterday, but again, in case you missed it, he became FFRF's full-time Director of Governmental Affairs in 2019 and is based in Washington, D.C. He's also an integral part of the soon-to-come FFRF Action Fund. He previously worked as the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Secular Coalition for America and was the Federal Affairs Director at Compassion and Choices. He and his husband traveled to places that would make everyone here jealous. So with that, we will take the first question.
Okay, question is, what would be the plus and minuses of a coordinated effort, including FFRF, the progressive groups, to put ballot issues on the ballot in every state that has restricted abortion access as a result of the Dobbs decision, either on November of 23 or November of 24 for the ballot issue?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that. So we are currently, you asked what are the pros and cons. I don't think there are any cons at all. I think it's a fabulous idea. We are currently actively weighing in on ballot measures in a number of states. I think it's 8 states of things that are coming up in the immediate future, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on things in 2 years. So specifically, any attempts to codify Roe at the state level, we will be strongly supporting, and any abortion restrictions that are on the ballot, we will be strongly and vocally opposing, and we will absolutely be working with our secular allies in those efforts.
We have a question over here.
Hi, my name's Bill. I'm a Texan, and I work for the state of Texas through a higher education university. And like many large entities, the state encourages us to contribute to our favorite charity through the state employee charitable campaign. However, the list of charities on that, the options there are screened. They're not supposed to be explicitly religious in nature. I'd like to see FFRF get on that list of charities, but my particular point is I used to donate to Planned Parenthood through that state employee campaign, and last year our wonderful Attorney General ruled that no state money could go to provide abortion services or any organization that provides such services. And so I look at it as, is this a free speech argument? Because I'm the person making the donation. It's just a conduit through the state. And so, that's my question. Is that a free speech argument?
That's a great question, and part of the answer will depend on the specifics of the program you're talking about. It sounds like there's an argument that some sort of forum has been created for you to, as an employee, benefit certain organizations. And as we know, thanks to Citizens United, money is speech. But the specifics of the program would really matter in terms of whether a forum has been created and what type of forum it is, whether it's a designated or non-public forum. And it sounds like there are restrictions on what kinds of organizations can be on it. So if you want to find one of the attorneys after and give us some more specifics about it, we might be able to give you a more specific answer.
And I'll just tack on to his last point. Yes, if there's something that is something that you want to follow up with us on, please find us afterwards, and we will get you our cards. We'll get you our intake information so that we can chat with you further about this. Because I agree, FFRF should also be on that list. Oh yes. So there is the combined federal campaign. And we are on that, so if you're a federal worker, you can find us there.
I'd like to ask for your comments on expanding the Supreme Court and justice term limits.
So this is term limits for Supreme Court justices. This was something that FFRF has been out in front of really from the very beginning. Representative Hank Johnson proposed a bill that would expand the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 to have it correspond with the circuit courts. And we were one of the first organizations, along with great partners like Alliance for Justice, Demand Justice, to be supporting that as well. We're also supporting comprehensive Supreme Court ethics, recusal, and transparency information, so SCERT. And it's really good, also supported by Representative Hank Johnson from Georgia as a member of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, and Supreme Court Ethics Recusal and Transparency Act. Think of it as the Ginny Thomas correction bill. So it would lay out, it would lay out very clear steps of when a justice has to recuse itself, when it'll keep track of how much money is being spent on amicus briefs, influencing influencing the court as well. So those are some really good things that are coming from Congressional Free Thought Caucus members and Representative Johnson especially.
And if I can just add a couple of thoughts really quick, if anyone is a little bit lukewarm on the idea of court expansion. First of all, you're not alone. Even a year ago, this was largely considered a political non-starter. But since Dobbs and since people have just learned and thought more about this, things are really quickly shifting in the other way. So I'm proud to say that we're kind of ahead of the curve on that. But people are quickly learning and getting behind this initiative. So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. That's the direction things are going. And the other point is that what should not be even remotely controversial is expanding the lower courts. Federal courts, federal judges and federal courts have been massively overworked for a long, long time. And justice delayed is justice denied. So in certain circuits, you can have your case pending for years in front of the circuit level because their caseload is just too much. And so that's outrageous and it absolutely needs to be fixed regardless of what you think about expanding the Supreme Court.
The letters that you send out, the non-allegation letters, only a small fraction of those are acted upon immediately, according to that slide I saw yesterday. What happens to the rest of them? Do you immediately litigate, or are there other options?
Well, sometimes people just refuse to talk to us. Unfortunately, we send out letters and we won't hear anything back, and we'll send usually at least 3 follow-up letters and try to keep getting in contact with the entity, whoever they are, school district, another government entity. But if somebody just keeps refusing to talk to us or respond, it can be difficult to follow up. But of course, if we keep getting complaints about the same school district, we keep contacting them, and we'll often encourage complainants or other people in the community to try to do what they can to force a response or to improve the situation or to report back. And occasionally, sometimes things get resolved and we just don't hear about it. The government entity won't respond to us, and later on we'll follow up with the complainant, or the complainant will finally get back to us, sometimes months or over a year later, and say, oh yeah, they fixed the thing that I was complaining about and it's resolved, and just nobody bothered to inform us. So there are a lot of victories out there that unfortunately we just never hear about as well. I don't know if you had anything to add.
I think that's about it.
I live in Polk County, Texas, where our sheriff cars still say, "In God We Trust." I remember at the convention last year, there was some discussion about FFRF being involved with trying to address that issue in Texas. Is that a dead issue?
I mean, as long as In God We Trust remains on our government buildings and currency, it will remain an issue that we care about. This is certainly not the political moment to address that issue. It's a legally settled issue that In God We Trust was never meant to promote religion, and doesn't have that effect. In fact, I'm pretty sure the court said it doesn't bother anyone, so I don't really see what you could possibly be complaining about. But in all seriousness, though, we know why it's there, right? It's a dog whistle for the religious right and now white Christian nationalists to say that this is their country and not ours. It's to erase us and our impact on this country. And so it continues to be an issue we care about. Legally speaking, it's not something that we can correct. We can't spend the capital to try to address that issue all the time. But we know why it bothers you. It bothers us too. And you can keep telling us about it. We do keep track.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yes. I was wondering if any of you could comment on the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News about the voting machines and, the lawsuit against Fox about the misleading statements that all the Trump administration and Trump has been making about the election.
I wouldn't say that I have the most informed opinion on the Dominion lawsuit, other than that it's a charade. There wasn't found to be, I mean, there have been numerous investigations at the state level into voting, and no fraud has been unearthed. And to the extent that that continues to be a talking point, and that those lawsuits continue to crop up, it's a charade to try to reinforce this idea that the election was stolen.
One lawsuit related to that that's not a charade is Dominion's defamation lawsuit against Fox News, and so I'm hopeful that so I'm also not an expert in the field, so I don't have any super valuable insights, but all I can say is I hope that this is an example of showing that there are consequences for just lying through your teeth to the American public the way that has been done. But it harkens back to what I was talking about before, that unfortunately the wheels of justice turn slowly, and that's particularly true when you have an overworked federal judiciary, so this is all going to take some time.
My question is about churches and filing Form 990s. I know the foundation has had several lawsuits in the past concerning this, and I think the last one was thrown out of the courts for some circular logic. Is there anything in the works to keep that initiative going and hopefully maybe get churches to file them?
One of the bills that we've been wanting to propose for quite some time has been to exactly do that, is to get churches to file 990s and play by the same rules that if it's good enough for FFRF, it should be good enough for local church. To be honest, there is some headway, there's some headwinds on that in Congress. Is that so? I know this is a bit weird, but so in my previous life, I worked on medical aid and dying, and then coming over to the secular movement. Going up against the church and some of our well-funded opposition, dogma is one thing, but money is another. And when you go up against money, that's an insane amount of resources that's going to be dumped on your head. So to do that type of bill, we would need to essentially campaign probably for 2 years, strengthen allies, find storytellers. It's certainly possible, and I really want to do it, but a lot of it is, hopefully, we would need a fair amount of capital resources to do it, to secure allies in Congress, obtain allies, get storytellers, and then go for a bill introduction. But I definitely like the way you think.
Hi, my name's Joe Bluebaugh. I live in Ohio, but I go to Washington, D.C. at least once a month for work. And last year in Boston, I asked about the David's tent that's in the National Mall that I think is just a huge travesty in what I think is the best public space in the entire country. And I was told by one of the attorneys that that is on your radar, and so I just wondered if you could give an update about if you've managed to do anything to get that David's tent off of the National Mall. Tell us what it is. Oh, you can just Google David's Tent DC and you'll see it.
So I was just in DC a couple of weeks ago for a different event that was on the National Mall, and we were right next to David's tent. It's a huge tent that it travels in different places on the mall because it can't have a permanent location on the mall, but it is basically just a tent for church. And what was really upsetting for us, I work for an organization called Pregnancy After Loss Support, and we were there to urge Congress to put more money into stillbirth prevention research. And we were there having our rally, and they had a church service at the exact same time. And they were playing loud music and everything like that. It was so distracting from our rally that it was really frustrating. But honestly, given everything that's happened in the last year, it's on our radar, but we haven't been able to do a lot about that because the rest of the world has been falling apart. But it's still there, and a couple of weeks ago, it was definitely on my radar, and I thought we need to dig back into this. And so right now it's sort of on the back burner, but it's still in on our radar.
Yes. be lowered. My name is Edna Hackinson. I'm from Colorado. And my question is dealing with, since churches are allowed to decide what medical procedures are acceptable in their facilities, has there been any thought about having an abortion clinic sign up as a church, the Church of Aphrodite, and use that to continue abortions?
Yeah, your question, I'd like to sort of generalize your question, because it is a good one. It's a question we get a lot in a variety of different contexts. So obviously, the impulse is, oh, well, if religion is, the dominant Christian religion is imposing its values on us through lawmaking. Why can't we use the sort of religious freedom privilege that they seem to have obtained and throw it right back in their face and say, okay, well, we're in a pluralistic society, so we're going to use religious freedom to obtain our goals. And that is a double-edged sword, because what the real takeaway from what the Supreme Court has done is not that religion is a trump card. It's that Christianity is a trump card, and what works for the dominant Christian religion is not going to work in a lot of other contexts. It is possible for minority religions to win in court on some things. But when it comes to big policy decisions, I don't think that is going to be the effective strategy that, on first blush, it could appear to be. And also, we don't necessarily want to go that route, right? If religion becomes a law unto itself, then law ceases to exist in this country, because, as we've learned, people can claim that their religion says anything they want, and that is not a recipe for a functioning society.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom, and I have a question about companies like Hobby Lobby that place restrictions on their employee health coverage based on their religious values. And all the restrictions I'm aware of apply specifically to either medical procedures or drugs that are specific for women. But my question is, are you aware of any restrictions put on procedures specific for men? And I'm thinking of things like vasectomies, treatments for erectile dysfunction. And if they don't treat both sexes equally, does that open them up to charges of discrimination?
What's the phrase? If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. Is that how it goes? I don't really have a comment beyond that, but I wanted to butcher that quote.
I will also add that one of the other very similar battlegrounds we're seeing along with abortion and birth control and reproductive care is gender affirming care, and that crosses people of all gender identities. And so I think that's very similar to what we're seeing with birth control, where we're seeing companies and we are seeing healthcare providers say, wait a minute, we are a so-called Christian company. We should not have to provide gender affirming care. So I think a lot of the frameworks that we're seeing around birth control extend into LGBT issues and specifically trans issues. And so I think as we kind of look at whether or not that's discrimination, I think the two bigger frameworks we're probably looking at there are, first of all, Establishment Clause and free exercise issues, but also the Americans with Disabilities Act and how that works with gender dysphoria. So I think those are more of the frameworks we're looking at than necessarily sex discrimination.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another thing to add is that one example that came to mind at first, although it's not a counterexample, it's not what you were thinking of, but recently there was a company that was wanting to ban the drug that is preventative of HIV. So they're not completely focused on women and trans people. They are also trying to, even though it's not based in fact, to go after gay people. So they're equal opportunity bigots, I suppose. But the other, legal side of it, and this is kind of what Kat was getting at, I think, is that so long as as this is viewed as a First Amendment free exercise issue, you're not going to make any progress under equal protection, most likely. You know, the company, we need to overcome that first hurdle first. So that's kind of the legalistic answer to it, is we need to correct the Hobby Lobby decision before we could go down that road with any hope of success.
Hello, my name is Chris Sweeney. I'm from Arkansas, the home of the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. You might have heard of them. My question is simple. How can we, as members of FFRF and constituents of our respective states, how can we help the legal team advance your causes?
Well, one of the first things that you can do is, if you think that there's a violation, report it to us on our forum online. We have cards here that direct you to that forum. Come talk to any of us. We can direct you to it and talk to you about an issue. So report it to us, and when you report it to us, please give us as much detail as possible. If you have pictures, send them. If you have videos, send them. Describe things in as much detail as you have. If you know other people who were affected by the situation and the violation, please have them report it. The more people who report something and the more detail we have, the much more effective our advocacy letters are, and the much higher chance we have of getting something resolved before we even have to consider litigation. So that's my 2 cents from the intake team.
I will also just say that I think that, like I said yesterday, education has also become a really important thing for our advocacy work. And I think that's definitely an area where our members can get engaged and help us out. There are often times where Kat and Sammi are writing to a specific area about a constitutional violation, and we're doing that on behalf of a member anonymously, and we're happy to do that, but oftentimes that is seen as this outside Wisconsin organization coming into our town, and they can't tell us what to do. So if you're there and you are not our complainant and you feel comfortable, you should be speaking out, going to the town council meetings or the school board meetings, or even writing a letter to the editor reminding people why state-church separation is a cherished principle and why it's important for true religious freedom. I think that is really important right now, to remind people that this is an individual right that we have to be free from religion, to have a freedom of conscience, because I think when we have all of these civil rights that are under attack, this is the one that kind of gets pushed down to the bottom, and people tend to forget about it and why it's important. And so I think we really need to sort of start reminding people why it's a cornerstone of our democracy.
And I would just add, I come from, since I was a young child, really active rural advocacy. And one of the things I think rural advocates do very well is community building. Be loud, talk to people. You are going to find people who agree with you or who you can ally yourselves with. And the louder you are in your communities, the more effective you're going to be on these local issues. Because like Rebecca said, a lot of times they see our letters and they're like, oh, these liberal lawyers from Wisconsin, they can't tell us what to do. But if it's your neighbor, if it's, the guy at Walmart or, the person at your local diner talking over coffee, they're a lot more likely to listen to your neighbors. People are a lot more friendly than you sometimes think. So really, I think trying to be loud and build community is the best way, because that's also what the Christian right is extremely good at, is building these really strong communities. So if we do the same thing, to combat that, that is what's going to be the most effective thing to support what we do.
And with the,
I apologize, go ahead.
Yeah, and with the Association of Christian Churches and of Christian Lawmakers and building community, well, the good news is we have an antidote to that. So there's a really good association of secular lawmakers, and we're going to probably be developing and enhancing our partnership with them over the next 12 months. So look for more Megan Hunts and coming very, very soon with FFRF programming as well.
And one last thought, I mentioned yesterday our new action alert software that we have been using, so that's another way that you can always get involved and encourage other people to make sure that you're on our list for action alerts. It's a way for you to get involved at the state and local level without having to do any research yourself, because we'll take care of that for you, let you know when it's a good time to take action.
Hi, my name is Becky. I'm from Colorado, and I have two things I'd like to ask you to address. One, you may have already sort of answered, but more specifically, I think there was a lawsuit filed by a Jewish group in Florida saying that Dobbs essentially violates their free exercise of religion, because under Jewish law, abortion is not, they can get abortions. The other issue is, I understand there's a push to have a constitutional convention, and if you have any comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so there are a couple lawsuits now. I think Dan talked about it earlier, that are pushing back on the anti-abortion laws based on religious freedom arguments. There's a Jewish group now and the Satanic Temple. Those lawsuits are in their infancy, and we'll see how seriously the courts take those claims. I'm not hopeful that that approach is going to win the day. Our litigation team has been reviewing options in order to bring our own challenge to some of those same types of restrictions, using a more measured approach, which won't necessarily get as many headlines, but may have a more long enduring effect. So it's certainly an issue on our radar, and I don't fault them for bringing those lawsuits, and I wish them the best of luck.
Constitutional Convention? Sure. Regarding the Constitutional Convention question, I don't think FFRF has an official position on that. Generally speaking, I think that more progressive groups are very wary of the idea. There's certainly some debate to be had, but I think most of the push for constitutional conventions is with the idea of passing a balanced budget amendment. But one word of caution is that if you were to actually do that, there's nothing cabining what this convention could address. It would still have to get ratified by the states and everything. So, but there's nothing. This idea of a runaway constitutional convention is a real thing, and just with the divided state of the country and the state, frankly, of the education of the majority of the country, I don't think it's a great time to be rolling the dice and say, let's make a new constitution. I think that we got a pretty good thing going on, and we should definitely not give up the ship. We should continue to fight within this marvelous document that we have.
Ross Meisner from Minnesota. Thank you all for the service you're doing. I haven't seen much in the news about the Johnson Amendment violations being prosecuted. Do you have cases where there's been a legal case brought against a church or a church leader, or won or lost?
So I expect that FFRF will get many complaints about this in the coming weeks, because obviously we have an election coming up, and this weekend I think is traditionally the weekend of Pulpit Freedom Sunday, where they encourage church pastors to endorse candidates. For those of you that don't know, the Johnson Amendment is the federal law that prohibits 501c3 organizations like FFRF, but also churches and other charitable organizations from opposing or endorsing candidates. And it is something that Trump said he got rid of. That did not happen. It still exists. It's still very popular. And right now, we are just taking complaints and then forwarding them to the IRS about that. And I think Mark can probably talk a little bit about the funding for enforcement from the IRS, but I do just have to do my duty to plug my new podcast, We Dissent. The next episode in November is all about the Johnson Amendment and the way that state church issues come up in election issues like churches as polling places and things like that. So if you want to learn more about the violations that we've seen that have come up even this year, I encourage you to listen to that episode, which will be dropping after the election, so mid-November. But Mark, do you want to take it about the...
Yeah, we actually did well in appropriations this year to get an increased funding level for IRS enforcement. Now, the wording on it is actually it's open, and a lot of it is up to interpretation. But it's going to give us an opportunity to go and work with the IRS about the importance of the Johnson Amendment, of keeping churches out of politics. It gives us a good opportunity to work with our religious allies as well. So there are opportunities that are coming up with that. And then just broadly about religious exemptions, that one of the really big dangers that's lurking is that the Trump administration was very, very close to promulgating all sorts of rules and regulations that said, if there's a conflict, the benefit should go to people who support religious freedom. So in 2024, a big danger is the idea that within probably a few days, conservative administration will put forward pretty much a blanket religious exemption. If you talk with most conservatives, they think they have the ammo from a lot of the court cases that people have mentioned as well. So that's one of the big dangers that is lurking out there, is how fast blanket religious exemptions could come into the fold.
Yeah, I know it was mentioned earlier, that Supreme Court justices get term limits. And, I would feel better if I knew how many years these career justices would be allowed to serve. I would sleep better knowing that. How many years would they be allowed to serve?
There's a lot of debate on different types of proposals for term limits as well. And so some have said 18 years, some say that each president picks 2. And so just as one point is, so that it's open to a lot of interpretation as the bills start moving through. That is some part of the broader reforms that we're interested in. And one thing about court expansion, that problem with court expansion goes after a lot of the judicial overreach that's been happening with Dobbs, and that will continue to happen. The court, in terms of term limits, that hopefully is going to cut down on a lot of the food fights that you see coming through the nomination process, where every side just piles on, and it becomes more of a regular function that you see in other countries.
I would also be pessimistic about the idea of the Supreme Court interpreting the constitutional language that traditionally we've understood to mean that Supreme Court appointments are lifetime appointments, to mean that term limits are fine, because they're the ones who get to decide what that language means, and they love their history and tradition, and when they're basically asked, is it constitutional for Congress to impose a term limit on you, I would bet on them saying no, but we'll see.
Hi, my name is Jan, and I'm from Wisconsin. And my question to you is there anything that we as a whole group can do to influence anybody, and if so, who would that be, to choose more atheists to be in the federal judiciary and SCOTUS? What can we do? And who do we do it to?
Okay, so, all right. So in Wisconsin, the good news, you have a commission that Johnson and Baldwin do adhere to. So you can start influencing that. So if there oftentimes, you can even go on, I'll have to find it on the website, but you can even see where appointments are coming from. And especially that if you do know people who are interested, who you think, man, this would be a really good judicial candidate, especially from Wisconsin, make sure you connect them with Baldwin's office or Johnson's office. So if you have a good candidate and could be an opening, I can give you my information. I'm easy to find. It's mark@ffrf.org, and we can start putting those folks into conversation with Baldwin's office. as well. So that's a really good advantage on that one. But yes, and one thing is that judicial nominations, they have been going really very strong for the Biden administration. I think it's 84 judges at this point in time. The Trump record at this point in time, I think, was about 70. So that is something that is outpacing, and I do hope that, and I haven't seen any judge that the Biden administration has put forward that is against the separation of state and church.
Yeah, so
Oh.
sorry. I was just going to say the generic answer is your U.S. senators are the ones who you could put pressure on to say, I want to see more of this in the federal judiciary. They're the ones who have the potential to make that happen.
That's also exactly what I was going to say. You should be talking to your senators and saying, this is what I would like to see in a judge. But also encourage the attorneys that you know and love to run for these positions. A lot of judges in different states are elected. We have had former interns at FFRF run for state positions in the legislature, but also for judgeships. So can convince Sammi and Kat that once they're done here, they can become judges.
All right, this is the last question.
Okay, so I am Jerry from Houston, and this is kind of asking an opinion of each of you. Will Trump ever face consequences for his criminal behavior?
Yes.
Yeah, I wish we had a more substantive answer to give you. It's obviously a big, gigantic, tangled mess, and he is just the poster child of being able to skirt the law and face no consequences. So, yeah, the rule of law is dead if the answer is no. So let's all sure hope the answer is yes.
The longer that you have an attorney general who's looking into this, the better your chances are. So, and Merrick Garland's background is that he prosecuted the Oklahoma City bombers. So this is someone I think who's very substantial on that. But if he's not there, probably not. And then that, of course, is excluding the whole host of other charges that's there as well. Also, can the January 6th Commission continue moving forward? We still have a lot to go with them, and we'll find out the answer to that question next week, and we'll see what the answer is.
I will say that there are, I'm not a criminal lawyer, obviously, so it's not my area of expertise, but I am an interested party who's also a lawyer, and so I have been focusing on the recent legal troubles, and from my perspective, it does seem like some of the recent developments are pretty damning. So that doesn't mean there's going to be the result that we want, but it seems, from my perspective, like he's in some very serious turmoil.
Well done. Everybody did a really good job of just asking questions and getting us out on time for dinner shortly, so thank you. I don't know if you've noticed, but these guys are amazing, so please give them a round of applause.